Welcome to the Sustainable Travel Podcast. I'm Emma, your host from That Travel. This is the podcast that interviews a range of different travelers from different backgrounds to see what sustainable travel means to them. And today I am here with Arianne, who is a mindful traveler and adventure seeker from Aruba, who loves to engage in positive impact experiences. And she's been a huge inspiration to lots of different people with her Instagram series, Positive Impact Sundays. Hello, Arianne.
Hi, Emma.
I'm so excited to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm super excited too, but also kind of nervous, but we're here. We're ready.
Everybody gets nervous on a podcast, but you don't need to be. We're just having a chat. I actually forgot my tea. I told you I'd bring tea and I didn't.
That's true. I didn't bring my coffee either, but I
Oh
have
yeah,
my
what
water.
time is it for you?
It's actually 5 p.m. So normally I wouldn't have coffee at this time, but I was like, well, it feels like we're chatting at a cafe. So, let's bring that vibe.
We'll have that vibe with our cups of water.
Yes, I
Very
agree. I
classy.
agree.
So Ariane, I want to talk a little bit about you. Tell us who you are and what got you started in positive impact travel.
Okay, so yes, as you mentioned, I'm Arian. You can find me on Instagram as Arianne Garra. So basically a little bit background about myself. I was born in Aruba, but raised in a Filipino family. And I've always wanted to make a positive impact in the world. Seems kind of broad, but that's ultimately what made me want to study to become a doctor. But then I ended up doing my bachelor's in medical natural sciences, and then I graduated with a master's in global health. And actually, after graduating, that's when I saw really that important connection between us humans and the environment and nature. And that is really what led me to develop my Positive Impact Sunday series. And I've been pretty consistent with it. Like ever since I started with the series, like every Sunday there's a new episode. So yeah, so that's a little bit. And also one of my big life goals is to be able to inspire people to live a fulfilling and meaningful life.
Mm.
And that's basically what my social media and my newsletters are all about. And currently, I work for a humanitarian organization. I'm a protection officer.
Mhm.
And aside from, doing adventures and like prioritizing unique experiences, I try to at least volunteer in the weekends for projects in nature conservation or as first aider or lifeguard or instructor for the Red Cross and really creating content for NGOs and showcasing the positive missions that they have in the community.
Mm.
So that's a little bit about myself. I don't know if you have questions.
No, it's really cool. I always notice that when you're posting, and when you're talking about the experiences you take part in, they're so varied. Like there's so many different things that you do. Like when you say, "Oh, I at least try and volunteer on the weekends," like I don't think that's like an easy thing. Like it's a huge commitment and it's really impressive.
It is a huge commitment, definitely. Like I always, that's also why I share different projects. So I can show people that there are different projects that you could really volunteer and give your time to. And people have different, I would say, different values. So I show them all these projects so they could choose and contribute to any of these projects.
Mm.
So it is a big commitment, but if you are committed to a certain project, then you would volunteer.
Yeah, and a different skill set as well, because I mean, you show a
Hmm.
lot of underwater projects and you're
Oh
able
yes.
to that's obviously something you're passionate about, but not everybody could kind of get involved in that and there's different there's a level that you need to be at to participate, right?
Hmm. So that's a really good thing to say because I always say when I post about marine conservation and when I post about diving. So recently I posted a reel about lionfish and coral restoration. People say, "Oh, I really want to get my license and be able to volunteer in these marine conservation projects." But I always tell people you don't have to have your license. You could always volunteer as well on land. So we have like these beach cleanups, we have reef cleanups, and really raising awareness, advocating for the nature, for your nature. And so it's really like you could partake even on land. Even if I share about marine conservation, you can do it even if you're not underwater.
Yeah. Awesome. That's really cool. I didn't actually know that myself, so that is very good to know. Um, so in terms of like you said that you grew up in the Philippines, right?
No. So I grew up in Aruba. So I was born and raised in Aruba,
Mhm.
but I grew up in a Filipino family.
Oh, so
So my
sorry. That was
culture,
my
yeah, yeah.
misunderstanding.
Oh no, it's totally fine.
Yeah,
So
cool.
really
So
the culture. Mhm.
so your family is all kind of Filipino culture and like have they raised you, would you say like with certain values that have made you think that way, or is it just kind of purely yourself that it's come from?
Yes. So I do feel like I really am have been raised in a Filipino culture.
Mhm.
So even though I grew up in Aruba and have Arubian friends, I went to school here, I do feel like I really have a deep connection with the Filipino culture. I
Yeah,
do really feel like I am Filipino.
yeah.
Even I think some people say I have the Filipino accent. I didn't know that, but apparently.
It's really cool. I love your videos about Filipino culture as well. When I see them, they always look so beautiful. Like they're so nicely shot.
Come
Um,
to the Philippines.
yeah, go to the Philippines, but you're in Aruba. You can sell both. You can do both.
Yes, yes. They're both beautiful.
And the island that you call home, Aruba, it's under like a bit of strain at the moment from over tourism.
Mhm.
I know that we've talked about this as well. So these experiences, like they're even more important. Can you tell us like a little bit about how the over tourism or the mass tourism on the island has affected you or like people that you know?
Ooh, okay.
A
So
big
this is a
question, sorry.
yeah, yeah. It's a really big question, and also kind of controversial topic at the moment, especially because we have election coming up. So I want to start by saying that Aruba is a really, really small island. So you could drive from west to east in like less than an hour without traffic.
Mhm.
And I do understand that the biggest source of income of Aruba is tourism, but I just wished we'd prioritize more a type of regenerative tourism,
Mhm.
that instead of like really thinking about just income from tourism, but really prioritize the locals as a whole and really instead of having like damages to Aruba's nature, but like restore it in a way that when tourism grows, Aruba's nature also restores, you know?
Mhm.
And I can speak from a personal experience. I'm sure everyone experience over tourism in a different way, but I could really see the difference between Aruba's nature than like how it was before and how it is now.
Yeah.
So we have like this really famous beach called Baby Beach. It's a lot of people's favorite beach, actually. It's not mine personally, thank goodness. But there's really a huge difference between how that beach was before and now. And also because they also developed that beach specifically, I think, for tourism. And just like a few times that I've been there, so like with my dogs. So let's say if I go to the beach and I just want to enjoy the beach with my dogs, I ended up doing a beach cleanup instead of actually really enjoying the beach because it just became really trashy. That's
Mhm.
like in the mornings, but then like in the towards the afternoon, then it gets really overcrowded.
Mhm.
And to be honest, I barely go to that beach anymore because
Mhm.
it just doesn't give me that same feels as how it was before.
Yeah.
And like another difference would be because I also do volunteer work for coral restoration, you could really see that you have to go really far to see vibrant corals. You wouldn't really see vibrant corals anymore, like close to the shore. So that's kind of, that makes me sad. And
Mhm.
I just wish like us, we would think that, hey, Aruba is our home and we really need to take care of the nature if we want to continue calling it our home.
Yeah.
And perhaps another thing is that right now, because of, tourism constantly increasing. Also, the cost of living is increasing for us. So the prices just keep increasing, but then our currency obviously is way less than the US dollars. Our income doesn't increase. So before we used to have like local prices, you would go to a place and say, "Hey, is there a local price?" And then they're like, "Yeah, okay." And now they're like, "No, we don't have local price." And I'm like, how does that
Mm.
make sense? Why do we have a tourist price and not a
Yeah.
local price, right? So
Yeah.
those are just some things that you're like, oh, it's tough.
Wow. That was
Yeah.
a really good answer. And I mean, you kept it like really concise so that we could like see what it means like for you specifically. I just want to unpack some of those things if I can. Um,
Mhm.
I think firstly, the first thing you mentioned is really important because particularly as you know, I've talked a lot about over tourism on my personal page, on Instagram, on my
Mhm.
blog as well. And one of the things that repeatedly will come up for me is people will almost like deny that tourists litter. Like they all almost come on my posts and say, no, no, the litter doesn't come from tourists. Or if we're having to tell people not to litter, like that's ridiculous. And I'm like, yes, we are having to do that. Like that is the level that we're at.
Mhm.
People go to these places, like not even just necessarily Aruba, but like everywhere, and think, oh, it's not my home. And I don't think they mean it. It's just, it happens.
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you mentioned that because it just made me think of another thing
Yeah.
as well. Like, because Aruba, honestly, if you ever come to visit, Aruba has one of the best drink drinking tap water. So, like for me, when I travel, one of the first things that I research, hey, is the tap water drinkable in that country? And Aruba's tap water is drinkable. And I've had several meetings with some ministers, and I was like, hey, why don't we put like a big, sign at airports saying you can drink Aruba's water?
Yeah.
Because it's so saddening whenever I go to supermarkets or stores and I see tourists come out of stores with a shopping cart filled with like plastic water bottles, and I'm like, you don't need that. You can drink the water here. So it's just, I just wish we'd like spoke more about it. And every time I speak with tourists, I do tell them, hey, you can drink the water here. There
Mhm.
is no need to buy plastic water bottles.
And do you
And
find that confused? Like, would they have known if you didn't say?
you know some of them don't know, and
Yeah.
then when they find out from me, they're like, oh, I'm gonna try it. And I had several people that has stopped buying plastic water bottles because then they're like, oh no, I'm filling up my water bottle now. But I had some people who's like, oh, but I'm afraid, I,
Yeah.
one of them told me, I remember just recently, that person was like, yeah, I drank the tap water and it gave me diarrhea. I was like, I don't think that's the tap water. I
Yeah.
don't think that's the tap water. You must have eaten something last night that. So
Yeah.
it's just,
It also like different minerals affect people's bodies in different ways. Like it's not that the tap water is not safe. Like it just, made you like feel a bit strange one day. You need to, keep going. You'll be fine.
mhm,
But that's a really good point, I think. And when we're talking about people leaving litter, I think there's a misconception that when you talk about littering, that people just like threw their stuff on the floor and like, they didn't care. It's not necessarily that. It's that these tourists are coming, they're creating a lot more waste because there are a lot more people, and then maybe
yeah.
like, the bins are overflowing, so the wind will like carry litter, like, or it's maybe that like they didn't know where to put like this particular plastic bottle, so they just kind of like shoved it somewhere and hoped no one would see it.
Yes, yes. So that's also a really big issue actually. So it makes me really sad sometimes when I go to like beaches here, and people would just, not everyone of course, but it the fact that they would have all these like takeaways, right? They would eat at the beach and they would leave it there.
Yeah,
I'm
strange.
like, they would just leave it there. And it's not just like one person or one group of people. There's several people who does that.
Yeah.
Or I remember we had this recent like protest by the beach, and it was a very friendly protest. It was just a way to raise awareness about over tourism and prioritizing regenerative tourism on our island.
Yeah.
And and two of my friends, they ended up doing a beach cleanup early in the morning, and so they put like everything that they got on that morning there so that people could see,
Mhm.
to raise awareness. But then people started shoving more things in there, and like it just overflow and then you
Mm,
got a dirty beach again. So it really is a big issue, the waste management. I mean, we already have an issue with waste management, and but the more people, the more waste that are being generated.
yeah, thank you for sharing that. It's so true that when I think we come as tourists, if we have good waste management in our country, we're like, yeah, well, like so does everybody. And it's actually not the case. And there are lots and lots of places that maybe just don't have the infrastructure in place. And it might not be anything to do with money or like government. It could just be that, as you say, you're a really small island. Like, where is that waste going to go?
Yes, exactly. And we have a lot of cruise ships coming as well. So it's just not the tourists that come and fly here, but also tourists from cruise ships. And you have a lot of like overnights that, maybe they have a layover in Aruba. And so I don't want to say, I'm definitely not against tourism because it is our biggest source of income.
Mhm.
But really, like I mentioned, I wish we'd focus more on regenerative tourism. Being raising more awareness on the waste that people generate. And I also, in my positive impact series, I always share as well, like, where can you recycle? We don't really have like a plastic recycling in place funded by the government, but we have NGOs really doing amazing work on recycling plastic. So I also share a lot about them so that people know, hey, I can recycle my plastic here.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's really, really awesome. And let's talk about that then. So you mentioned kind of regenerative tourism as an alternative. And like, yes, I agree. I'm 100% behind you. I think it is the alternative. I think when you have, a crowd of people who want to come and they don't necessarily want to do bad things, they want to do good things, but like they
Mm-hmm,
don't really know how or why or like where to start. And if the government isn't in a position to change the infrastructure there and
mm-hmm,
then regenerative tourism, in my eyes, is the answer.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That's
Yeah.
definitely true. That's definitely true. I mean, I feel like when you travel to a place, and if we talk about sustainable travel, it's really you go to a place and understand the context. So, for example, in my case, before I go to another place, I would research, hey, what is this country facing? What are the issues this country are suffering? And really kind of understand their context to be more aware on how you're impacting the country that you are visiting.
Mhm.
So if we talk about regenerative tourism, it's really like how is it affecting locals, and are we actually traveling and supporting the locals, or are we just going there for vacation and just having a good time? Of course, we're going on vacation having a good time, but also at the same time, hey, what are the impacts that we are having on the locals themselves? Because here,
Yes.
I feel like we have to start prioritizing and really thinking about the locals instead of just putting tourism, tourism,
Yeah.
and like I mentioned with the price increases, how we don't have a local price, but we have a tourist price and we have to pay that tourist price. So it's just those type of things that it is
Yeah.
really, yeah.
With what you said about the tourist prices, that's something that is extremely important as well. Just to briefly touch on it, because there's often a tourist price and a local price in lots of places, and that does come about because of various things, but maybe it's that the tourists don't want to haggle, maybe it's that the tourists tip a lot. And so,
Mm-hmm.
people kind of think, oh, well, they must have more money, so the prices go up, blah, blah, blah. But it's quite extreme, like you're talking about in your case, that basically the local price would just be eradicated and the tourist price becomes the norm. And that must be really hard.
It's really hard. It is really hard because also our income doesn't increase, it stays the same. So at one point I'm like, okay, are we gonna be able to continue living on our island if everything starts increasing? Like, you start to think about those things as well. I'm a really positive person, so I really do think positively, but at the same time you also think about these things, you can't help
Yeah.
think about it. Yeah.
You start to see how it can all come together and why people do get like as stressed as they do. But as you say, I think regenerative tourism is a great idea for overcoming these battles. And to explain regenerative tourism for those who don't know, it's the idea of leaving a place better than you found it, which is what you're all about. Um,
Yes.
so when we talk about this is obviously called the Sustainable Travel Podcast. You kind of briefly touched on it, but what does sustainable travel mean to you?
Okay, so sustainable travel. Well, I want to first off start by saying I'm definitely far from a perfect sustainable traveler.
Same.
And there's still a lot that I am constantly learning about sustainable travel. So, for example, on your page, I learn a lot about what is ethical wildlife encounter. So now I'm very cautious when I decide to book a trip with wildlife. Then
Hmm.
I'm like, okay, let me see what Emma said about this. So, it's really continuously learning.
Yeah.
So for me, sustainable travel is continuously learning, being open minded, and respectful of the places that you visit. Really being aware of the impact that you leave in each place that you visit. So, the worst thing you could be is to be judgmental and ignorant.
Hmm.
So just go to a place and not even understand the local customs, the etiquettes, not understand what issues the country or the context that you're going to is facing. So it's for me, it's really um, thinking about the locals, but also the nature of the country that you are visiting. And that you can achieve by continuously being open minded and continuously learning and understanding all these things that come into play.
Yeah, brilliant answer. That's a really good answer. Like just being open-minded and listening, like trying to learn
Yeah.
and like trying to listen. It's a really, really good answer. I mean, in terms of like as a local Aruban, what do you think tourists could do to contribute more positively to tourism in Aruba specifically?
Specifically to Aruba, okay. Well, if you ask me that question, I would always say like think about not only when you visit Aruba, but also other places. Really, if it's possible, research projects being done in the places that you are visiting. So, for example, in Aruba, what are the projects that we're working on? And normally in every country, for example, in Aruba, we have projects working that are making a positive impact, that are making social impact, or projects on animal welfare, or projects that are being done restoring our natures. So not only in Aruba, but also in different places, there's always projects that are being done that are rebuilding the community or restoring nature. So let's say if you could come here and want to make a positive impact, perhaps you could volunteer your time on one of these projects. And if you don't have time, there's always ways that you could also donate and raise awareness. And really also being mindful of the waste that you generate. And yeah, we really touched upon that the ways that people generate. So really be cautious of that as well.
Mm.
And most importantly, support locals. Support
Yes.
local businesses, visit local farms or local markets. We call it local farmers market, but it's actually really just markets that um, locals are selling their own products, doing local workshops. So really, and staying with locals. If there are local accommodations, stay with local accommodations and book with local tours.
Yeah.
So
Yes. I always think that's the best way. And when you're looking like for positive impact experiences, I would say to people, look for things that are locally run, like local
exactly.
projects, because at the end of the day, like volunteering is a great thing to do. But volunteering is often not run by local people. And it should
Yes.
be locals that tell us how they want their islands and places to be improved.
Exactly, exactly. That's a really good point because there's a lot of websites out there that show, hey, this is how you can volunteer here, but it's actually very like you just go there, you're not really making a positive impact. You feel like you are, but
Mm.
it's not really projects that are supporting the locals directly. So I know the initial research could be difficult, but for example, if we're talking about Aruba specifically, I share a lot in my Instagram about local projects being done here. And in other countries, I'm sure that there are different initiatives that you could also find. I know it's just a little bit more difficult to find those.
But I think, wanting to do it is the key. Like, they're not
Yeah,
hard to find if you want to do them. You have to look,
yeah,
and that's step one, isn't it? Like trying to, wanting to do these things. Um,
exactly.
and I
That's
think a lot
definitely
of the time, like when people are traveling, they might look at something like a positive impact experience and think, oh, well, like I'd love to, but I only have, a week or 2 weeks, and like I don't want to kind of eat into my vacation time. Do you have any, I guess, tips or like advice for that?
that's a really good question because I also work a full-time job and I have very limited vacation days. And sometimes, I understand that people don't really have much time and they really want to see the country and really just enjoy their vacation. So that's definitely understandable. And this is why I also say that it's really important to understand the culture, the context of the place that you are visiting, so that you go there and if you can make a positive impact, so volunteer your time or donate to these projects. So if you cannot volunteer, you could always support by donating to different projects. And one of my favorite ways to give back is again supporting the locals. So and also when you stay with locals, you get more unforgettable experiences, like different unique experiences that you wouldn't normally get if you just, stay in a big hotel. You wouldn't get really that authentic local experience. And so really one of the big best ways to give back is supporting local projects, supporting local initiatives, and supporting local businesses. I say local a lot because really when we
So do
go
I.
to we have to support the locals.
No,
And
I
and
mean, I constantly find myself like local, 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 and people like stop, like, but it's so true. And I think it's what you said there is so important at the end where you said, just support a local project. Like, you don't have to be diving into coral reefs, like picking up coral and like whatever. I mean, don't do
Mhm.
that. That's a bad example, but like, you don't need to be down there, like, saving the reefs. Like, you could do something as simple as purchase a coffee from someone who gives back. Like, that could be the way that you take part in a positive impact experience, right?
Exactly, exactly. And that's also what I share a lot about in my Positive Impact Sunday series is I also raise awareness and so like this is okay, maybe this is another topic, but um, I also highlight NGOs and businesses that are doing a positive impact on our island and how you could support them. So in the captions, I always put a description, hey, how can you support this local business? How can you support this local organization? You can visit their website or raise awareness, talk about them. Even just talking about an organization or the work, the projects that are being done, even just talking about them is already creating a positive impact because you are raising awareness. You're showing, hey, this is being done, this is how you can support them. And that's that's a way of making a positive impact as well.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And the positive impact experiences that you've done then, have they been, because you said you obviously when you travel, like you have your limited time off as well.
Yes,
Are
yes.
they mostly in Aruba or have you done any outside of the island?
So most of my Positive Impact Sunday episodes, they're mostly filmed in Aruba,
Mhm.
but they are not context specific to only Aruba. So majority of the episodes, they could be applied anywhere. So I speak very broadly, but also very specific.
Mhm.
And if I highlight like volunteer projects that you can do here in Aruba, I'm sure that in your country, there are also projects that are doing tree planting, or there are also projects supporting animal welfare. So if I film an episode here in Aruba, let's say, recently, for example, I did an episode about um, donkey sanctuary. Let's just give an example. It might be context specific here, but there's probably a sanctuary back at your home that you could also volunteer your time to.
Yeah.
And when I talk about positive impact, I'm not only talking about, how you could support your community, but I also talk about how can you make a positive impact in an individual's life, in your family and friends' life, and how can you make a positive impact on yourself? Because if you are good, then you are able to make an even bigger impact. And one thing that I also like to share, and like I mentioned before already, is raising awareness. So when I raise awareness on mental health, or when I talk about queer empowerment, or when I raise awareness on sudden cardiac arrest month, those are things that are worldwide. They
Yeah.
can be applied in different contexts. So even if they are filmed in Aruba, it still can be applied anywhere.
Yeah. I love when you do those videos. They're so important. Like, I don't think that gets talked about enough in the travel community. This is me going off on a tangent now, but like I don't see enough creators talking about like queer empowerment, like women empowerment. Like it's
Uh-huh.
honestly, thank you for doing that. I think it's really important.
It is
Um,
really important.
it
It's
is.
it's
I mean,
really
what have been some of your like favorite examples of just either positive impact Sundays or positive impact experiences that you've taken part in?
Ooh, there's a lot actually. Actually today I posted one that I'm so super happy about, and it's really talking about differences in culture and being open-minded and
Mhm.
not judgmental. Because if you are open-minded and open to receive different cultures, it makes you more empathetic as well because you understand different perspectives. And in that way, you also I remember because my best friend and I we stayed in this village, and they were rebuilding that village, and we were there. And then the lodge host was like, hey, do you want to go to a traditional wedding? And we were like, and my best friend was like, woo, okay, yes, let's go. And then I was like, I'm excited too, but at the same time I was like, oh my gosh, nervous, because you don't want to offend someone because you're in a country that has different customs and etiquette, even though I researched like, okay, what is considered okay there, but you're still careful. But then we went and it was amazing. Like everybody was so open, and it really felt like we belonged because
Yeah.
everybody was so welcoming and everybody was so happy. So,
Wow.
and
That's so cool. Wait, where
yeah,
was that,
yeah.
Ariane? You cut out at the beginning. Where was it that you did the wedding?
Oh, it was in Morocco.
Oh, cool.
Quite recently, yeah.
I guessed it was
So
abroad.
yes, yes, yes. That was one of our like beautiful experiences.
Yeah.
And another thing, if we're talking about positive impact, because since we were talking about queer empowerment and women empowerment,
Mhm.
so I also recently created one about, empowering the queers. And it's because, there's still a lot going on in the world that you sometimes hear in the news about queers being bullied, and it always affects me when I hear that. And and being around, having a lot of queer friends as well, you do understand and really hear their experiences. And because for example, my brother, he does really queer empowerment, so I try to set him a lot in my platform as well, to show people like, hey, you are empowered. Your voice should be heard, not just stay in the shadows. So those things are really important as well. So positive impact doesn't have to only be making a direct positive impact in the community, but also knowing about other situations that is going on around the world.
Yeah, 100%. I think, to be honest, there's a lot of talk about like, well, women are mainly equal now, or like queer people have a lot of rights, and it's like maybe in your country, but in like this other country, actually, no, it's not very even, and we have to be aware that like, I could get all political, but like, we're not free until we're all free, you know?
Exactly. It's also a very broad topic that we
Yeah,
could really
I
continue
know.
talking about. Yes, and I can get really passionate about it too. So,
I know. Well, okay, we won't we won't do that. But I mean, you have a full-time job, as you said, so I'm like completely in awe of the fact that you managed to juggle all of this and like your online business, your positive impact experiences, your volunteering, your full-time job, like all of that. Like, I know there's a lot for you to say here, so I don't want you to give like all of it to us right now, but like,
mhm.
how do you do it? Like, what are the main ways that you cope?
Whew. Emma, even I don't understand like how do I do all of those things? It's insane, honestly. But I've always been a very hardworking and determined person. And so when I set my mind to something, I really try to achieve it. Um, and for context, did you know I used to suck at time management? I was
Okay.
really bad at time management. I recently just got okay. And one thing that I noticed that, let's say if it's something that really requires my mind to think, I do those important tasks in the morning.
Okay.
And so when my brain is fresh and I need to ideate, let's say a content, or if I'm writing, then I do it when it's quiet and it's in the morning. So I get that done. And but before I used to over plan. I would over plan, and then at the end of the day, I feel unsatisfied because I didn't accomplish what I set myself to accomplish for that day.
Yeah.
But now I'm getting better at that. And one thing that I also noticed, because I'm always like in a rush, like I'm always doing something. I'm like, I need to do this, and then I would continuously work, but
Yeah.
actually I'm always distracted. So I think
Yeah.
I'm working, but I'm actually distracted. So
Yeah.
now I notice I should set myself like a focus time and
Yeah.
have like a break time,
Mhm. I mean,
and I
I
get
could
more
learn from
done.
you. I think you know this about me, but I have ADHD and like sometimes I'll be like, yeah, yeah, I did like 3 hours work. And then Marie will be like, oh, what did you work on? And I'm like, well, actually, I just got lost down a rabbit hole like researching this one thing. Yeah.
True. Emma, I can totally relate. I can totally relate because I remember when I was still in back when I was still studying,
Yeah.
whenever we have to write like an article, I would open the web, open all these different articles, and I'm like, I have like 100 articles to read. And I'm like, I don't know where to start. I feel overwhelmed. And I'm like, yeah, but I've been doing this for like 5 hours. Like,
Yeah.
seriously? Like, so
And
I
you still
always
haven't
say,
started.
exactly. And I don't know if it's something with perfectionism as well, because I think I would say I used to be a perfectionism, but now a perfectionist, sorry. I used to be a perfectionist, and but now I really think like, hey, it doesn't have to, like, this clip doesn't have to match really the music that you're putting on in your content, or this double checking everything before you send a project. It doesn't really make a difference. Ultimately, it's what you deliver, the content that is what you are creating, that is what matters.
Yeah.
So
And the
I always
message.
say, exactly the message. You have a powerful message. So it doesn't matter if it's perfect or not. That's why I always say that perfectionism is a waste of time, because I used to be a perfectionist, and I do feel like I wasted a lot of time trying to perfect everything.
Mm.
So going back to your question, because you were like, how do I juggle everything? But so I always say now, like, don't overplan. Set
Yeah.
yourself realistic goals for the day. So if you're gonna do something very important, you're like, okay, let me do that early in the morning. If especially if you're a morning person, or if you're a night owl, if your brain works better at night, set it for the night. But really set yourself realistic goals and give yourself a deadline. So, for example, you're like, okay, I need to finish this today. You set yourself, okay, I'll give myself 45 minutes and then I'll take a break. I'll give another 45 minutes, I'll take a break. And then you say, okay, I'm going to finish it then. That's it. When you don't finish it, no, you're going to finish it. You make sure you finish that within that time. But you also pressure yourself, and that's the thing with procrastination, right? People say I procrastinate because I work well under pressure. So Like just put yourself under that pressure and then get
Yeah.
your stuff done. And I always say now, because I was almost on the brink of burnout and I never realized it until now. Maybe throughout my life I've always been like on the brink of burnout, but I've always ignored it. And
Mhm.
then I read symptoms about burnout and I'm like, oh girl, you seem like you're burning out.
Yeah.
Incorporate breaks and also have that slow morning
Mm.
to at least, even if it's just 10 to 15 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes to just listen to the nature, maybe derp around, write in your journal, and then at night really have that unwinding moment. Because,
Yeah.
if you don't have that unwinding moment, like I used to not be able to sleep well.
Hmm.
I would like sleep, feel like I slept, but then woke up and I'm like, my brain is active. It's
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
if you don't give yourself that time to unwind, then you will sleep with an active brain.
Hmm.
And then you
No, it's
wouldn't
so
really be
true.
resting.
It's so true. I'm really bad at falling asleep, and I often find, like you mentioned, the slow morning. That for me is like the key to a good day. Like if I don't have a slow morning, woe betide anybody who comes in my way. Like it's not good.
It's yeah, it's because like I always say now, like because if you have a chaos morning, then you're bringing that chaos throughout the day. Because you're like,
Mhm.
I need to do this, and then throughout the day
Yeah.
you're like, okay, people still describe me like I'm always like on the go, but now I'm more like I give
Yeah.
myself breaks.
No, yeah. I mean, you definitely like it's super super inspiring, but it's really good like because also your newsletter I know like focuses on a lot of these tips. So I guess if people want to find out more about like what you've been talking about just now, they can come over to your newsletter and have a read, right?
Yes, yes. So the thing is with social media is very, you can't really talk much because you have like a limited time frame. So sometimes I want to speak a lot more, but then you
Yeah.
have to condense everything in like a 15 to, I don't know, 1 minute reel, and then there's still so much you can say. So that's why I developed my newsletter, because then I can elaborate more on
Mhm.
all these topics.
Mhm. Incredible. Incredible. Um, so I can't believe how much we've covered in that amount of time. I really feel like I could sit and talk to you for actually hours.
Yeah, I feel
But
that too.
do you have anything that you want to kind of bring us into conclusion, like when it comes to positive impact, when it comes to regenerative tourism, over tourism, any of that stuff that we've covered, anything you want to just conclude on?
Yeah, I always tell people that, you know, have an open mind and understand not only an individual, but also everything as a whole, because the way you can make a positive impact is knowing what's going on, understanding what different peoples are struggling with, what are happening in different places. And knowing that, that's how you will know how to make a positive impact. And like I said, it's not only in communities, but also you can make a positive impact in an individual's life, in your family's life, in your friend's life, and yourself. So, and really keep an open mind and don't be ignorant. Many people are very ignorant. They just say, no, this is what I think. I don't want, let's say here, like, let me give an example. Recycling, here, recycling still, I, in order for you to recycle, you have to pay to recycle your plastic.
Mhm.
I do it because I really care about our environment. But many people are like, why? Why would I do that? La, 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 la. And just be open minded and understand why. And yeah, basically keep an open mind and don't be ignorant or judgmental.
Yeah. And understand, I think that when we travel, like we're in someone else's home. Like I say this a lot, but like you wouldn't just like waltz in through the door with your shoes covered in mud and like, keep them on and
Mm-hmm.
then like fling your jumper over the chair. Like it's someone else's home. And just because you are not directly affected by these things, and obviously that's like a very
Mm-hmm.
literal kind of metaphor for litter and for recycling and for that kind of thing. But it also applies to other stuff as well. Like don't go in there and make a mess. Like do your
Exactly.
research. Yeah, do your research,
Exactly.
think your thoughts, be curious, and just kind of try to make minimal impact, minimal disturbance until you got a grip on it.
Yes. Beautifully summarized. Exactly. Exactly.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And Ariane, so what are you working on at the moment? Because you're always working on something, and where can people find you?
Yes, you're right. So basically, I am working on a lot of things, and I do want to, like I've mentioned before in some of my reels, that I'm trying to escape my 9 to 5. But
Hmm.
that's because I want to make an even greater impact, and having like limited vacation days and, having a 9 to 5, I feel like it's really constraining me to make more of a positive impact.
Yeah.
So yes, so I'm working on that to reach financial time and location freedom so that I could also do more mindful and slow travel and really understand more the different con- issues happening in different countries and supporting those projects as well. So more positive impact series being filmed in other contexts.
Yay. We love that. We love that.
Yes.
And where can people find and support you?
So I'm pretty active in my Instagram. You can find me as Arianne Garra. And in my Instagram, I have a link in my bio. That's the link to my newsletters, and that's where I share more, specifically about more details about positive impact, and also about how to live a fulfilling and meaningful life. I share a lot about personal development and mindset.
Mm.
So you can find me there. My TikTok is kind of dead, but it's the same as my Instagram handle.
That's fine. You don't need TikTok. Yeah, I guess like with your newsletter, it's a lot of like, as you said, self-development. And like you talked really beautifully earlier about like working on the self to be able to like give back to others. And I think that's kind of like what you're doing with the newsletter as I see it. Like for me, it all plays into this positive impact, but I know that's not like your main, like the main thing that you do, but it all ties in for me.
It is actually, you described it beautifully, because as I said, if you can make a positive impact on yourself, you can give that positive impact to others.
Mm.
So that's also why I say that I want to inspire people to live a fulfilling and meaningful life. Big and that comes in as personal development, mindset, and giving back.
Mm.
So it all ties together, like you beautifully said.
That's wonderful. Okay, well, I will wrap up. This has been the Sustainable Travel Podcast. You can find us on Instagram at the Sustainable Travel Podcast, and we also have a Facebook group which is called Sustainable Travel Tips Group. If you enjoyed this episode or found it useful, you can give us a review on Spotify, or you can like and subscribe to the YouTube. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Emma.